Hey Clear Lake peeps, Ross England here with Clear Lake Guide Service with your fishing report for October 8th, 2020. As you can see, or may not be able to see, that really isn't all smoke in the background. That is actually cloud cover. We've had big news, I guess, is we've had a couple of days here in the last, well, today and yesterday, where our morning lows, at least over where I live, next to the state park, were down into the high 40s. So that is a real positive sign. That means the water temperature dropped to where yesterday and today I saw it at 71 and 70. Could be other temperatures somewhere else around the lake, but where I've been fishing, that's where it is. Lake level is at 1 foot, so it's dropped maybe an inch this last week. It kind of slowed down a little bit. Supposed to get some cooler weather. You know, next week we're supposed to be down, or it's supposed to be holding in the mid 80s. The smoke, which has been the big story, was down into a moderate category AQI wise, and it looks like the forecast for the next week is pretty much the same. So the fires that are to the south of us, we're not seeing a ton of smoke. There is some, but we're not seeing it like it was. Right now I can see the Narrows, and I can see probably some of the hills down behind Monitor Island from where I am right now up in John Pearlville, which is the mouth of Rodman. So a lot clearer than it has been. So that's all good news. Water clarity, you know, I've actually seen a couple places this morning and I had to double check myself because I actually saw clamshells on the bottom at 3 feet. So there was a real thin algae bloom on the top, really thin. I mean, I could see through it. And water clarity in some areas probably 3 to 4 feet, in other areas probably a foot. Just depends on where you are. Running around yesterday, the algae bloom was not as bad as it was the week before in the last report, but it's still worse than you really want it to be. I went down as far as Henderson yesterday and could actually fish at Henderson, whereas the tail part of last week, it was so gummed up you couldn't even get a bait to sink there. So I would say the conditions are slowly starting to improve, and with the morning lows or overnight lows starting to drop, I think we're just going to continue to see better and better water conditions. Weeds are really starting to disappear around the lake. They're not nearly as prevalent as they were. There's some areas you can go into where you were seeing, you know, a lot of mats on the surface, and the mats aren't there. There's still some stuff down below that you have to almost be on top of to see. So those are the conditions. Activities this coming weekend. There's I believe it's Wild West Bass Trail is having a kayak tournament, and I think these are, the kayak guys can pretty much start anywhere they want to start, but I think it's based out of Lakeport. Not sure. Somebody can correct me in the comments down below if they'd like to. And then ABA has 2 separate tournaments, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. Both of them are going out of Lakeport for sure. So those are the activities. I think for the Wild West bass people, I think they're dealing with tournament shut-off or water cut-off until Wednesday next week, which means Monday and Tuesday it'll be pretty quiet around here, and then Wednesday it'll get busy as it builds into another big WWBT tournament the following weekend. Not this coming weekend, but the following weekend. So fishing. We've had a couple of pretty good days. Some people you talk to are catching fish and doing quite well. Other people are just struggling, and some people just hit a little patch here, hit a little patch there. That's kind of what I'm doing, is the patch theory. We had 18 fish yesterday, and from about 10 o'clock until 12, that was a pretty slow period. It was just one here, one there after a really good start in the morning. This morning, out again. Had a really good first hour and a half before I quit doing what I was doing. I was out trying to make sure I was ready for for some potential work. So had a pretty good morning, no complaints at all. It was kind of like Old Clear Lake in the fall, which was a lot of fun. So I had somebody a couple weeks back, 2 or 3 weeks back, ask, hey, would you go over the baits if you were going out fishing right now, and kind of go over the stuff that you would use, just to narrow it down a little bit. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the fishing report right now, going over some of just the basic baits that I'm hitting the water with. And over the last 2 days, we've caught fish on all of these and variations of the same things. Maybe not the exact same one I'm showing you, and I'll talk about those briefly. So here we go. In no particular order, probably caught the most fish on an underspin. Used several different types. I would say a 2.8 to 3.8 Keitech, in that range was probably your better size. And you know what, you guys can beat me up later. Hopefully this turns out okay and you can actually see what I'm showing to you. I'll tell you, the color didn't seem to make that much difference. It was more of a deal of that was something that we were doing when we were in an area, knew that there were fish there, we were catching them on something, and just showed them something different. So Keitech on an underspin. Shallow running rip bait. This happens to be a Lucky Craft Pointer Lightning, which looks an awful lot like a Megabass Vision 110. It's just $15 cheaper. So 3 or 4 different types of rip baits that we used this week. Caught fish on all of them. The key with the rip bait, I don't think, is so much color or size. It's having a bait that's going to run in the right depth. Most of the rip bait fish that we caught this week were in less than 4 feet of water, so it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to be throwing a Stacy 90 or something like that is just going to be banging down in the rocks, hung up, whatever. So wanted something that would run in the 2 to maybe 3 foot range, and both of those baits have done a good job with it. Very basic item for fall on Clear Lake. This happens to be a Jackall TN, boy, I think it's a 70. It's basically the same size as an LV 500. We also caught fish on the LV 100, also caught fish on the LV 500. So again, pretty staple bait for this time of year, and you can fish them a number of different ways. We actually caught just as many fish on a straight retrieve with it this week as we did with yo-yoing it or any other techniques. So, and the color didn't seem to be that important as well. I did pick up one color in a 100 that kind of stunk. It was, believe it or not, a shad color that didn't produce very well. But anyway, some vibrating bait. Something I hardly ever throw, and I was trying to think of something I could do in an area where we were catching rip bait fish, but maybe they had turned off to it, and that's put on the old Super Fluke and tried it. And it wasn't going very well for me, I'll tell you. It wasn't going very well at all until I figured out I needed to pretty much dead stick it, just cast it out and let it sink. Most of the fish that we caught, and they were some of the better fish that we caught actually, it was sitting on the bottom. Not necessarily, down there for a minute or 2 minutes. It was a kind of deal where you cast it out and not work it very hard, let it sink. A lot of times the first sink is when they'd hit it, but I'd pop it along. It's kind of the way I fish a Senko, which I don't fish very often, but just kind of pop it along the bottom and let it sit, to a 10 count or 15 count. A lot of times you'd just see the line, no tick, it would just whoop, start to tighten up. They were swimming off with it. I don't know if that's the correct way to rig it or not. It worked for me, but I put a 1/0 Gamakatsu weedless drop shot hook on there and just nose hooked it, and it seemed to work just fine. I actually tried another hook the first day that I used it and lost a couple fish, missed a couple fish, so I really started scratching my head and started looking through catalogs and whatnot, and I thought, well, you know, we have really good luck with this Gamakatsu drop shot hook. I'll just try a bigger version of it with a weed guard, and for me it worked out just fine. And then last but not least, because those of you who know me know that I never go anywhere without it, it's like the American Express card. Just a good old-fashioned drop shot, nothing fancy. Either a 4.5, 5-inch, 6-inch worm. This one happens to be a Berkley bottom walker, I think it's called, in June bug. We used a couple different colors and caught fish on them. It wasn't something that I spent a lot of time doing, and actually I don't spend a lot of time doing it this time of year. It's something that I should do more often. This time of year I kind of get away from the plastics and go more towards the reaction baits. As long as I have people with me who can handle a bait caster, we do just fine. It just seems like, you know, these fish, first of all, you can move around a lot more, you can cover a lot more water, which is a great thing in fall because you're looking for fish that are active, and sometimes the way that you find them is by going through big long stretches of inactivity going down the bank. And you know, that pretty much covers it. I know that you know, I just ran into a couple, their name was Gardner. They stopped by and said hi. It's been one of those mornings, but I've done more talking than I've done fishing. And apparently the wife got on a pretty good bite with a Senko, so that's a, I'll say, good deal to Mrs. Gardner, and great deal for good guiding to Mr. Gardner. It was a pleasure to meet you too, actually. Thank you. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us today. Looks like we got a weather change coming in. I don't think it's going to amount to any rain, so I think the smoke is probably behind us at this point. Hopefully with cooler temperatures we won't have to worry about another fire start up here. So y'all get out this weekend wherever you're going, catch some fish, have a good time. Fall's here. There's an awful lot of good places to fish, and this is one of them. So last good news. My little great niece nephew is in Texas right now, and apparently he is just loading up and whacking stripers on some lake he's fishing with his dad, his grandpa, and a guide. So the last report I had, he had 8 stripers in the box already and was having a great time. So Caleb, awesome, good job, buddy. I wish I was there to watch you, but I'm glad Grandpa set it up for you and you're having a good time. You'll have to tell me all about it. Peeps, we'll see you later. Thanks.